All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the August 10th, 2021 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF code of conduct. Let's get started. We've got bigger than usual agenda, which is great. First of all, we can do some introductions if anybody is interested. We're starting the 123 release cycle, so now might be a good time to just reintroduce like myself and some of the other leads, and we can see if there's anybody here who just wants to introduce themselves or ask any questions for us. So I'll start. I'm Mark Rossetti. I work at Microsoft, and I'm the SIG Windows co-chair. I work in the Azure org, but primarily focus on upstream or Kubernetes projects. With me is James and Jay and Claudio. Do you guys want to go and introduce, just say hi real quick?
Yeah, I'm Jay. I'm Claudio's my friend, and yeah, I'm one of the leads, Windows leads, SIG Windows upstream leads.
Yep.
Go ahead, James.
Hi, I'm James. I'm one of the leads as well. Welcome to anybody else new.
No, sorry, it wasn't unmuting for me. Hey, I'm Claudio. I work a lot with Containerd and images and building them and so on and so forth. So that's I'd say my main area of expertise. So if you have any questions or issues with that, I can try to help you as well.
All right, sounds good. If there's anybody else who wants to either introduce themselves or ask any questions, either raise your hand or just go ahead and say hi. If not, we can get going with the agenda. All right, I'll continue on with the announcements. So we're just entering the 123 development phase. So wanted to take some time now to just start figuring out like what KEPs we're planning on advancing, because getting those kind of registered early and having eyes look at them early is always helpful. These are the three that I'm aware of that we're probably going to be pursuing. There's the privilege/host process containers, which went to alpha in 122. I think we're going to try and see if we can get this to go to beta so that we can get more widespread adoption. I'll probably be submitting updates to the KEP within the next week or so. We can figure out exactly what all the requirements are and if that's ready. The big potential risk for that I see is we do need a release of Containerd with a whole bunch of changes, which we'll talk about later in the agenda, to be kind of out and released to go to beta, since that'll be always on, but can talk about that later. The next one was the kubectl log viewers. Is Ravi or Aravind or anybody from Red Hat on? Do you want to quickly comment on this? Is this something that we're still trying to pursue?
I think Sebastian maybe.
Sebastian.
Yes.
Hey, yeah.
Sebastian,
I'm also from Red Hat. Sorry, the 2258.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you just remind me which one that is?
Or there was the node log viewer KEP. There's oh no, shoot, I got the links all wrong.
If it's
there was the node service log viewer KEP, which I will also add here. This was what Aravind had started the enhancement and that created the enhancement issue and the KEP about. This is so you can do the kubectl node logs to get access to the either journald or Windows service logs.
Yeah, I know Arvin's been spending a lot of time on that. If that's not, sorry, I'm not 100% sure about the status on that.
Okay, we can follow up on Slack. I believe that one got accepted for alpha in 122, but the implementation didn't make it. So we can probably just need to update the milestones on the KEP for that and continue work on that.
Okay.
Hey, and sorry to put you on spot, Sebastian. I'm sorry. I was thinking that you are already aware of that. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no worries. I was trying to figure out if that was what I was thinking of, and it was,
Yeah.
but I'm just not 100% sure on how to answer
I
the
think
question.
we can sync up with Arvind, and then perhaps we will let you know, Mark and rest of the folks.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'm assuming that since it was approved for the 122 release and there was kind of implementation PRs that we're going to continue to pursue that for the next release. But we can confirm later. Okay, the next one is the one that Ravi, you've been working on for the identifying Windows pods at API admission time. I'm guessing we're planning on trying to get this into 123 as an alpha state, correct?
That is correct. And today morning I had a discussion with Jordan offline. So I think just to give everyone some rewind of what has happened. So the main points were we should have backwards compatibility with the node selector and tolerations being accepted even for like whatever number of releases we are going to have for Kubernetes. So that is number one. And number two is the workload templates say if they have a node selector, how are we going to pass that information onto the pods so that at the validation stage, we can directly validate the workload templates, not the pods. So those two are the points that Jordan has raised. So I had a discussion offline with him today. So he wants explicit node selector to be set on the workloads templates because I think as we discussed last time, merging the user given node selectors in the pod template of a workload template is going to be hard. So that was the reason that he wants node selector to be explicitly set for the workload level templates. I think that seems reasonable, but from a user experience standpoint, what would happen is if the pod has a if the pod is already having a node selector plus toleration within the runtime class, it would automatically be merged. Whereas if we have a runtime class at the pod template level, it will not be immediately available within the workload template for the validation, the pod security admission plugin to validate. So like I'm sort of still thinking, but what I feel at this point of time is Linux is already doing something similar. Like say if you have a runtime class in the pod template of a deployment or a daemon set, unless it hits the pod stage, nothing will be updated in the pod template level because runtime class mutating plugin would act only on the pods even today. So that is something that already exists. We are not going to touch. So that inconsistent user experience already is there. And in order to prevent or in order to preserve the backwards compatibility, we are still going to have it. So I'm still thinking, like if you folks have any suggestions, I'm all ears. Let me know. But this is the current stage of things. Like Jordan, if we put the node selector, he in the workload template, he's fine with it.
Okay. Some background for anybody who's new to the call, or this has been talked about most meetings in the past, but this is really, there's no definitive way of identifying if pods or containers are scheduled for Linux or Windows nodes in the Kubernetes API. There's a bunch of ways that are recommended, such as runtime classes or node selectors. And now that there are going to be some policies that may enforce that certain fields are set for one or the other, we're trying to make that more concrete about how to identify pods for Windows so that we can exclude it from checks from Linux specific fields, for example. So I think we talked before and decided that if we didn't have really consensus by either this week or next week, that we'd schedule like a breakout meeting. Do you think now would be a good time to do that, Ravi?
Yeah.
Or mean, we don't have to do it today, but try and get something scheduled for this week or next week.
I think next week should be good. Like Monday or Tuesday, I'll set something up.
Okay.
But at high level, I think Jordan has given his opinion. So I need to find out if, like, I need to think through if there are any implications. Like at this point of time, the only thing I can think of is, say, if we use node selector for at the validation stage, would it be okay to use the node selector in the mutating stage of the API server admission? The main reason is, like in the downstream OpenShift side, we have a mutating admission plugin. And previously we were thinking we would not use node selector because anyone can apply a node selector. Now with the validation stage, approving node selector as a valid way to say it's a Windows pod using node selector, would it be okay to use the same field at the mutating stage is something that we need to think through. So I need some more time, but I think I'm fine with having the discussion. Like, say if I come up with some other counterpoints, which I cannot think of now, I will set up that meeting next week.
Okay. Yeah, and whatever we do, we should just have somebody from SIG Auth also take a look, even though I think, does Jordan kind of talk for SIG Auth as well?
Yeah,
think
Jordan talks
sometimes-
with SIG Auth and API server both. So.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for driving all of this, Ravi. You
No
can
problem.
we'll follow up
I'll-
next week and maybe have
Yeah.
another meeting about this.
I'll update the comments with the discussion that I had with Jordan offline today.
Okay, awesome. And then we can take another look at with the comments that you've just mentioned.
Yep.
The last one, I think that you created this one, Jay. But I know Claudia was working on this on and off too. I saw an issue that's still active or open for Windows conformance. Is this something that we still want to try and pursue, or I didn't?
I want to do it. I was thinking to coincide it with the removal of
Docker share.
some of the yeah, well, I was thinking of a few things. Well, I was thinking of 1.22. I was thinking of the removal of those APIs, and then looking at those, and then looking at what's going on with the proxy stuff, because there's certain things that aren't supported by the user space proxy that's still in tree. And then but so I do want to do it. When is the date for having those finished?
I'm not sure if they've settled on the actual dates. And they've changed when the enhancements deadline was the last couple of releases. So I'll have to, I'm trying to take a look now, but I don't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why we can't do it, because I don't think it has to be. I mean, we can do it with what we have in place now, right? I think the thing to do is to get a definitive set of tests that we say these are what we expect to pass in a Windows cluster that, supports, for example, Active Directory, that doesn't support Active Directory, that supports network policies that doesn't support network policies, that supports, like, just so that we have a definition of Windows that actually makes sense for customers. And I think there's so many ways we can do it, and I think we can do a first pass at it for 123.
Okay, for the 122 release, the enhancement freeze was end of week 3 of the development cycle. So that's not a whole lot of time.
Okay.
It looks like September 9th is the date.
Okay, so that's still about a month off.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could take a day and write a first draft of this, like an outline, and then I could just literally bring it and say, look, what do you want to change? You know what I mean? Because I think we all have an intuition of what it means to run Windows. So I think it's just a matter of us writing it down. right? Like, so that there's something in place. I don't think that this is, has to be super hard. There may be some back and forth about certain things, like, for example, maybe people don't think topology services should be in the conformance definition, but like, or maybe Ravi's stuff, right? So,
Okay, yeah, if you'd like, we can set up some meeting and just do this on Zoom, maybe some Thursday or Friday.
yeah, I almost feel like we should just do it, right? Like we should
Yeah.
just get on a call and spend an hour writing the thing, right?
Yeah.
I do have a question regarding the implementation detail. Would that basically mean adding a new tag, which basically means something like Windows conformance, which would be different from regular conformance or not conformance tags?
I don't think anybody's going to
Because-
let us add any tags.
Because it's quite difficult to add any type of tag. I think I have a pending pull request since a couple of months trying to
No,
add
yeah.
a new tag.
Yeah, yeah, we're not going to get a Windows conformance tag. I don't even think that other SIGs will necessarily, yeah, like want those tags. And I don't even know if we think we want those tags, right? I agree with you. I think that's a nightmare to go down. I think it's
But-
coming up with a definition, and as long as the definition is objective, I think that's what matters.
And as for the definition, I suppose that would also include regex, right? Which basically targets
so.
the tests.
It should, sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I suppose it could include whatever we think it should include, right? we're the ones that are running Windows clusters, right? So like who all wants to be involved with that? Sounds like you're interested, Claudio. I can set something up. Claudio,
I am,
James, Mark, anyone else?
and then we can post on SIG Windows and Slack.
Okay, cool. Does anybody else right now want me to jot their name down so I don't forget it, or should I just ask in Slack?
The Rancher team would definitely be interested, but it's just me here. I don't think Jamie and Luther were able to make it.
Cool.
So
All right, Ross.
potentially more people.
Okay.
we should add something in Slack just so everybody can see it too, or maybe even the email list.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. I mean, if VMware, Rancher, and Microsoft are all there, I think that's a good enough quorum.
Yep.
Ravi, if anyone over at Red Hat wants to come, just ping me.
All right.
Sure, Evan.
I'm gonna continue for interest of time. I need to double check if they're still doing the enhancement liaison role, but assuming they are, I will just solicit volunteers to be the SIG Windows enhancement liaison for this release. This role is something that's just for the kind of duration of one release, and it's mainly just a way to facilitate or to help with some non-coding contributions by facilitating the different enhancements that a SIG is putting forth and interacting with the release team. I'll post in SIG Windows also asking if there's anybody who would like to volunteer for that, assuming that they're still doing that in the 123 release, and we can kind of continue from there. There's a couple of issues that looks like we want to discuss, so I'll jump into that. James, do you want to talk about this one, the bumping GMSA API version, or?
Yeah, so in 122, a bunch of things broke. Some APIs were broken, so I updated all of the GMSA CRDs and upgraded a bunch of dependencies and things. In that, I noticed that the CRDs are still in a V1 alpha, and this came up with the customer as well, and they asked why it was still in alpha. GMSA itself in Kubernetes went to stable, I think, in 118, 119 time period, and this webhook hasn't changed for a very long time, for a couple of years now, other than the upgrades that I did. And so I think we should maybe bump this to either a beta or a V1, but I wanted to open up an issue and bring it up here and see if anybody had any things that they need to get in here before we go to a more stable version.
Yeah, I was taking a look and it sounds like that. So the way that this works for anybody who's new is that there is a field on the pod spec, Windows security context, credential spec, or it might be GMSA credential spec or just credential spec. And that's a JSON blob that gets passed to, for Docker, it gets written to a file, and then the path to that file gets passed on the container activation call. And for containerd, it gets passed along the cry API. And my understanding is, though, that the syntax of that JSON is kind of locked in place. There need to be changes on to the Windows OS or like the HCS layer to update those. And then this is a way that cluster admins can keep track of these credential specs as Kubernetes objects. And then there is an emission webhook that will kind of blast the contents of this into that JSON field. So given that the pod API is stable and that the HCS layer is stable, I'm kind of inclined to just suggest we bump this right to just a V1 API. Since I believe that this was just an oversight as we promoted the feature to beta because it was tracked in the out of tree SIG thing. Does anybody have any thoughts or objections to doing that? These are just the CRD definitions and they live in the Windows GMSA Kubernetes SIG. So as long as the webhook gets updated at the same time, the scripts that deploy the webhook and the CRD definitions should be in sync. I guess people can take another look and comment on the issue if there's any concerns, but I don't really hear any objections.
The same YAML is being used for all Kubernetes releases, right?
Yes.
Won't that be a problem for stable releases, which do not have the V1, only V1 alpha or beta?
Well, the pod APIs were graduated to stable.
Okay.
And the schema of that is just a string that's a JSON. That's the JSON serialized version, or it's a string that's a JSON blob that contains this. So this CRD is a way of specifying what the contents of what that JSON string should be in YAML. And then it just gets serialized right into that JSON string and put in the CRD spec. So my understanding is this has not changed even since the feature was in alpha, like the actual structure of that JSON.
Yeah, and this particular version is independent of the Kubernetes versions. We own this in the GMSA component.
All right, well, we can take that offline. I wanted to, I edited these notes about the container DCNI support, but since Sebastian looks like there's an issue here, do you want to discuss this? And then if there's time, we can go back to the container DCNI updates.
Yeah, sure. I just came across this yesterday and this morning, so I'm still trying to fully understand what's going on. But my understanding is that on Linux, if as a fallback if there's no cloud provider associated with the node that's being joined to the cluster, then the Linux kubelet is going to be picking the network interface with a default gateway. And that behavior is not seen on Windows. Instead, it's just picking any interface. So it seems to me like this should be happening on Windows as well. So I put a bunch of links in the code to kind of the culprits as to what this is happening, and basically comes down to on all OSs, it's checking the proc file system and proc/net/route to try and find an interface with a gateway. So this seems like it needs to be fixed. If people agree, I can put some time into looking into this some more and see if I can come up with something.
Out of curiosity, do you know, is it always just picking the first interface that PowerShell like getNet adapter would enumerate?
So it uses Go's net library dot interfaces,
Okay.
and it will then loop through them and find one that fits the either IPv4 or IPv6 criteria, and then a few other criteria. But I don't believe that it takes into account whether or not it has a default gateway in it. So that seems like it should be added.
Yeah, that seems like an oversight and probably something that we should just go ahead and try and fix.
Yeah, this is really important to us for sure. I'm really glad you're working on this, Sebastian. Thank you. Because it's really confusing to figure out what I was just looking at this with Friedrich yesterday and and a meme, and we are just like trying to figure out like what's the right way to set up the node IP and why is the node IP wrong in our clusters and stuff.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad that I'm not the only one that's run into this issue. Yeah, I'll take a crack at it and see what I can do, and maybe reach out on SIG Windows. And then if I can't do it in time, or if I get too busy, then maybe someone else can pick it up. But at first, I'll try and do something about it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for bringing that up.
I will say that it's kind of weird though, because like it's not always the case that you want the default gateway one. Sometimes you don't want the one that has the default gateway, I think. But yeah, definitely. Thanks. Just let us know how it's going when you're working on this and stuff. And for sure, keep us posted, even if you're just like hacking on it and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I had wanted to spend a minute or two to kind of explain the current state of the container D updates, mainly around the host process support, because we do want to try and get more people to use and give feedback to host process containers. Right now, it's kind of in a weird state where you have to build a couple different components from a couple different branches to get that support. But we're working on kind of centralizing all of those. I believe that the details of what to do, like where to build currently, are in the docs that went out with the 122 release. So if anybody's interested in giving this a spin, you can follow those. But in order to go to beta, I think we need all of these. We need all of the support just in container D and in a release, so people can grab the like release bits and just set the host process fields and get going with that. The big one is we added a bunch of fields to the CRI API on for specifying if it's a host process container, and also just some other fields for how the pause container gets activated. So those are here. We're working on vendoring those in, and then there is also a couple of changes to the HCS shim that I don't believe went in with this PR. I'll find the PR for that too, but we need those to go in. And then the other big one is this pull request from Perry about adding like wiring up those calls to the plumbing those through, pulling the fields off of the CRI API and into container D, or passing those over to HCS shim. If anybody is interested on how all this works, please feel free to review these, like any of these PRs. There's a lot of interesting kind of work here, and if you're interested, especially in contributing to SIG node, these are some good PRs to look at. For now, let's yeah, we're still recommending that people build from various branches, including this one of Perry's branches to test the container D processes. I see Peter Horniak said, are there any EDE tested somehow exercise host process nodes where it's active? Yes, we do have one ETE test in the Kubernetes repository that we're running. It is on the SIG Windows dashboard. Right now, that's a very simple test, and what that test does is it echoes I think like the host name or computer name, and makes sure that it matches the node name and not the container name. And for that test, we have set up some CI on the SIG Windows tools. I can show that real quick. That
I
will.
linked in the test that runs there, Peter.
What was that?
I linked in the test job that we're running right now.
Okay. So we do have a package that gets built nightly that does build container D and HCS shim from those branches and bundles them up in the same format as the container D releases. And this is what is linked to. This should be what is linked to on the kates.io page for how to run with the host process containers. And we'll be updating this to build from the container D branches as the different changes merge. But so we do have a kind of a way to do this, and the tests that do test the host process container page do target this this GitHub release. Where is it? It's right there. This GitHub release to get all of the container D and HCS shim bits as needed.
And Claude, you just opened up a PR against container D to add tests directly into the cry test, right?
Yeah, that's true. I've opened up a pull request to add additional tests in CRI integration in container D. They're a bit more extensive than the one in Kubernetes. And I think the idea is to have them run on pre-submit in container D, I think. But yeah, it's going to be tested there as well, so we won't have any regressions once Paris pull request merges.
Awesome, that'll be great. And then as part of going to beta, I think we do have plans to add a lot more EDE tests in the Kubernetes repository to cover the kind of the major scenarios there. All right, we're a little bit over. Does anybody have any other questions or want to bring up anything? If not, feel free to add items to the agenda for next week or just reach out in SIG Windows on Slack. I'm going to stop the recording now and then hand it over to either to Jay or somebody if we're going to do the SIG Windows pairing.
Yeah, we skipped last week, so I don't want to skip every week. Do
Actually,
folks want to do it?
James,
Yeah.
could you stop the recording? I think you started it, so I'm not able to stop it. Yep. I'm gonna head over to SIG Node because they're doing the KEP collection